You can start to influence principals. Once they get past a certain age, they're going to start having their own opinions on things, and that's what's coming next. I call that the danger zone. But right now, if Doug wants to convince his kids that the Cowboys are evil and the Eagles are great, that's the time to do it. That's the time to drive home these principal beliefs, because they do have a tendency to stick. I know a big thing is how you wear your hat. Are kids allowed to turn it around, or do kids have to wear it forward? That would be a principal belief. Ultimately, it doesn't affect how they play, but some of you are going to have principal beliefs, and at that very young age, that all of those things kind of stick. So, my biggest, the one thing I want to make sure I hit here too is how many are coaching that, what I would call that macro level, that young kid level. Be very, very aware of who sends the message that everyone is supposed to listen to. Okay, generally, great youth coaches don't get a forum to express their opinions. All right, the people that are provided the forum are the people at the big league level, the people that have become so-called experts. All of these people that have a national following and that are supposed to know the game of baseball better than everyone else. What they are is they are micro coaches. They are coaching the greatest of the great, the elite of the elite. They are very qualified at their profession, but their view has become so narrow that they have really forgotten what this looks like. And oftentimes we listen to them because we know who they are and we value their opinion. It's just that it's been a while since they've had to pull back. It's been a while since they've had to teach the love of the game, because the people that they work with are so talented and have passed all of these barriers of success that their love has been proven, and now it's just a matter of growing in the game. So that's my one thing. When you coach these kids at this macro level, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to those kids. When you hear a message, you need to challenge it, and you need to make sure it's a solid message for your age group. Okay, and that's that macro level. Okay, any questions with that macro level? Anything that I said that you want to at least explore a little bit when you've got what I would call big picture love of the game mindset?
Did you list all of your core principles?
You know what? No, because I didn't know they were my core principles. I didn't know they were until after the fact. I was like, wow, like those were things that were said so often that people couldn't help but realize those were unwavering beliefs. And last week or 2 weeks ago, I said, the 44-year-old version of me is better than the 25, and I hope the 55 is better. And I'm willing to change my beliefs. Like if a better option comes along and you can convince me of it, I'm on board. It's just that these principles are things that are fixed. Like these are the things that were like this isn't a belief. Like this is it. Like I'm not budging on this one thing. So. And it's such.
And that's why his Instagram account's so fun to follow, because that's because you're reluctant to budge on some of those. Like, isn't that where a lot of the people will just send you like, you're an idiot. You
oh
can't,
yeah.
You know what I mean,
yeah,
like, and then it becomes entertaining just
right.
to be stepping back
well,
and reading all the comments.
And look, the reason I was insulated with my principles is because I knew that the people that were calling me an idiot were micro. And they weren't wrong either. Like in many respects, they weren't wrong. They just didn't know that I was here. And I was trying to create a love of the game. And I was trying to get my young dudes sprinting out of the car, wanting to show up to practice and bludgeon other teams. And that's what we did. Like we would roll in, and Joel did it too. I mean, Joel's a good friend, and he was an instructor at our facility. And we took a ton of pride in rolling into these venues and just bludgeoning people. And it wasn't because, honestly, it wasn't because we were these great coaches that had these secrets. We literally coached process instead of results. We let our kids swing freely. We let them enjoy the game when other coaches were coaching them. And Joel, I'm sure you've had this experience like I have. We would be in a batting cage and I would be throwing, and I would say nothing. And our guys would hit rockets all around the cage. And to my left and to my right, every other swing was a coaching cue. Every other swing, a coaching cue. Keep your eye on the ball. Do this, do that. And I'm like, geez, So that was a very principle-based position, and that's why we got better. I'm convinced of it. I'm absolutely convinced because our kids never heard a conflicting message with respect to principles. They knew that they could swing hard, the helmet could pop off, they could hit the ground, and they would look down, and I would do that. Now, there were other things that I would coach. But at that young age, when precision wasn't the utmost importance, we didn't want to overcoach them. We didn't want to put precision in front of intent, and that's what I call overcoaching 101. So when Doug says his Instagram is fun to follow, because I would get drilled, but I knew in many respects they weren't wrong. Their lens just didn't telescope like mine. And if I wanted to telescope down with them, I could have a discussion on a professional level. But I was talking about little dudes, and my little dudes will outrank your little dudes because I was up here with a macro level.
Can I say two things? So
Yeah.
you hit on base running. And you mentioned just about running balls out when you're
Yep.
upsetting the pilot. You talk a lot about awareness as runners.
Yep.
Is that a little bit more because that's something that's pretty basic of what you talk to about. Like we are going to peek at the ball when we're
Yep.
getting out of the box. Like,
Well, so at that real young level, we would teach the game. Trust me when I say. In fact, I wrote down some things that you might appreciate here. So these were some things that I would do under the macro level that all qualified as fun, but they weren't explicitly instructive. They were implicit, like they were just having fun. So one of the things that we do at the real young level is we'll get them all together. I don't know if Doug did this or not, but every position has a number, right? Like pitcher is 1, catcher is 2, first baseman is 3, 4, but they don't really know that yet. So as a warm-up, instead of some monotonous, boring, mundane stretch, I would just say 6, and they would all run to shortstop. And then I'd say 8, and then they'd all run to center field. Then I'd say 4, and then they'd all run to second base. 5, and then they'd run to third base. Because the stretching stuff is micro. Like these are little kids. They roll out the recess in their jeans and go. Like they don't stretch. We don't stretch. We go. So one of the things that I like to do is at this real young age is they like to win. They like to have fun. They want to test. They want to be curious. They want to see how good they are. So I'll put cones. And Doug, I don't know if you did this, but I'll put cones and then maybe I'll roll balls. And if they field a ball and record an out between the cones, that's not an error. So they get to keep their hat on straight. And if they make an error between the cones, then they have to turn their hat sideways, which they like. That's a neat thing to do. Now, believe it or not, I've had some kids so principled in that hat that they refuse to turn their hat. And that was an issue we had to cross. I was like, it's just a game? But okay. Right? So if you made an error between the cones, I would have you turn the hat. In order to get your hat turned back the other way, you had to make a great play outside the cones. So what we would find is a kid with his hat turned would desperately want to get his hat back straight. So he would say, throw me one outside the cones. Well, he's literally asking to make a great play, which I love. I think we American coaches tend to teach fundamentals and dismiss creativity. I think in some of the Latin places, they don't teach fundamentals. They just let them go, and they test boundaries better than we do. So this is one great way where if that hat's sideways, they'll go, give me outside the cones. And then if they go outside the cones, then they have a chance to get their hat back on straight if they make a great play. That's a fun game. By the way, I told Coach Cooper at Penn State about that, and he goes, I'm doing it today. So he did it. I sent him a text. I go, how'd your hat? They loved it. I go, yeah, because it's fun. Everyone loves fun. That's the other thing. Like once you get down in here, man, when you back it up, those kids, they love you. They're like, Coach, he's amazing. Hey, we've been doing that since we've been 7. You guys are 19. You're still boys. You're still boys. Pop-ups. Kids love pop-ups. Like the minute they understand baseball principles, they love pop-ups. So no takes, no foul balls made my list. I think that's super important. And then the other comment I had in this is I had volume. Like if you're gonna organize a practice, organize it around volume. That doesn't mean 3 hours. That means do as much fun stuff as you can. Like don't worry about the talk. Don't worry about the stretch. When they get out there, get to work, have fun, and you'll be amazed at how fast they grow just by the love of the game. Because what they'll do is they'll start to love the game, and then they'll start to look things up themselves, and then they'll show up. Coach, I found this on the really, and then all of a sudden they're showing you what they learned. So that's that big picture stuff, and then what starts to happen is when they start to get better and coaches start to cut players, and then this thing has to start narrowing down. So that's what I want to talk about next. And on that little picture there, I called that the danger zone. So the reason it's called the danger zone is because you're stuck in between this micro and this macro. You're stuck in between. Some kids just want to keep playing for the love of the game, and some kids want to grow, and some kids want to get better. And there becomes this conflict. There's a conflict between coach-parent. There's a conflict between player-player. It's a very, very difficult time to navigate. At this point, I believe that your purpose as a coach is to help players reach their full potential. That means being honest with them. That means being honest about positions. That means being honest about where you might project as you get older. That means extreme honesty. I have a note up there, you can see it says, organism must improve to the demands of the task. When your really big macro picture, when no one gets cut and everyone gets to play, you can take the task and lift it to the player. That's no harm in that. Everything's about the player. We just want you to have fun. But now, because we're cutting players, because you're growing in the game, because this game is going to exist whether you play it or not, there's a certain standard to which you have to play it. And sometimes telling that to parents and telling that to players sometimes can be painful. It's truthful, but it can be painful. And you're stuck in between that danger zone, because you really have to find out if the player is willing to grow. And if he's not willing to grow, in all likelihood, he'll stop playing. Eventually, he'll stop playing. And that's okay. That doesn't mean he's a bad person. That just means he might not be a baseball player. But as a coach, from our perspective, we have this delicate balance between making sure we keep instilling love of the game and making sure we continue to grow the game. And that's where our practices take on more of a detailed focused look. And I'll talk about some of that. Emotionally, mentally, and physically, if you notice there, that triangle is starting to narrow a little bit. That perspective is getting finer and finer. From an emotional standpoint, when you're on a team at this level, you want to make sure that you have value added. All right, you've moved from just belonging to now you want to contribute, and you want to have a place. And that's real difficult. You know, when you have a 12 or 13 person roster, our biggest challenge is making sure player 12 and 13 have value added. They need to know, in their mind, they need to know enough. They need to know enough to add value. They need to know enough to be relatively good at this age. And then I have relative growth. You know, at this age, everyone compares themselves to their buddy. Everyone wants to know, am I better than him? Am I better than him? I'm hitting third, so I must be better than the dude hitting sixth, right? I'm hitting eighth, I must be better than the dudes on the bench. Everything is a comparison, and it's very, very dangerous, because we know that ultimately, if you want to grow, if you want to get really micro, you're going to have to ignore all that competition. That's just noise. Those outside influences are starting to they rob us of the passion of the game, but it's real. They're there, and all they want to do is compare themselves. So this danger zone is this very, very critical time between external influences, comparison with themselves and with others, with how they rank in the game, where they see themselves. Do they see themselves? Is this something I can pursue? And then the original love of the game. You know, they start to question a little bit. Is this the same game that I loved when I was 7, when I was 8? So it's our job as a coach to really navigate that, and it's hard. It's so difficult. And one of the biggest mistakes coaches make at this danger zone is they ignore the issues that need to be discussed. I mean, some of these things that you feel, you know, you have to be able to do this like a champ, because what you're probably getting pretty good at is you're probably getting pretty good at running a micro practice. You hopefully you know the game. Hopefully you study the game. Hopefully you enjoy teaching the game. But when you get down here, things get so fun teaching the game of baseball that sometimes we forget to pull back and go,